thank you for your generosity there. I run my whole ministry on what you're doing right now, and then we give that away, and then some. And so, just I appreciate it very much. I was excited to hear your tone in the room. When I say your tone, I mean, as a teacher, I could pick up the feeling in the room. Part of being a good leader is knowing when the crowd is ready to move on. So nothing, as a guest, there's nothing worse than a pastor. Well, there is worse things, but there is. I mean, it's really frustrating when you're the guest pastor and you're the guest preacher, and the pastor is so into worship, he's not noticing no one else is. And I'm on the front row going, would you please give me the mic? Because I could tell from the crowd, that they're ready to move on. So when I brought up historical arc, I actually had 3 alternative lesson plans written for today, because if I'd have picked up after that first bit that wasn't interesting, we'd have went to option B. But what I felt from you is like people leaning forward and going, man, that makes a whole lot of sense, and it helps with the word. So we're going to keep on with that. All right. I got a bunch of those. All right. And so that where historical arc helps. All right. So let's do one. Stoning kids. Have you ever heard a pastor take this one on? Say, I don't care. Tonight I'm going to take on hell. I don't care. Stoning kids. So my whole life I was taught that if rebellious children were taken outside the city and stoned. Okay? All right, so here's the passage, all right? And I made a boo-boo. Somebody might know it. I copied and pasted it from my Bible on here, and it didn't paste the reference, so I'm not sure where it is. But it is in there. It's verse 18 of some chapter of some book. I can tell you that. All right? Yeah. So this is what it says. If someone has a stubborn and rebellious son who does not obey his father and mother and will not listen to them when they discipline him, his father and mother shall take hold of him and bring him to the elders at the gate. They shall say to the elders, this son of ours is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey us. He is a glutton and a drunkard. Then all the men of his town are to stone him to death. You must purge the evil from among you. All Israel will hear of it and be afraid. Deuteronomy 21 is where we were before. All these scary things in Deuteronomy 21. Deuteronomy 21, 18 to 21. Yes. All right? If someone has a stubborn, rebellious son who does not obey his father and mother and will not listen to them when they discipline him, his father and his mother shall take hold of him and bring him to the elders of the gate of the town. And they shall say to the elders, this son of ours is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey us. He is a glutton and a drunkard. Then all the men of his town are to stone him to death. You must purge the evil from among you. All Israel will hear of it and be afraid. Deuteronomy 21, 18 to 21. So, does God condone the stoning of children? It is the word of the Lord. Are you going to pick and choose what you think, who you believe? Are you sold out to the word or not? Now, I want you to put your thinking caps on. Did anybody hear anything in there that goes against the notion of stoning children? I'm proving a point here that we always filter Scripture through what we were taught our whole life. We were taught our whole life that God said to stone children. Is that what it says?
They went through a process with him before they took him.
Absolutely. And I want you to hold that because that's step 2. Because obviously there was some sort of process. Yes. Yep, that's step 2 and 3. Yep. Is anybody find a wording in there that is against stoning children? Drunkard, yeah. How many? You stupid 7-year-old drunkard! Get over here! You getting the whiskey again? What's wrong with you? Kid all jacked up. You 7-year-old glutton. How many of you parents have problems with your 7-year-olds eating too much of the dinner you serve them? No, it's always 2 more bites. 2 more bites of the beans, 2 more bites. This is not a child. The difference between a son and a child. That's one. Let me just read you some of my observations I made about this. The reason I had to deal with this is someone wrote our ministry. And listen, I get 70 emails a day asking me to solve Bible questions, okay? I just can't, all right? I can't do that. But this one I found interesting because of the tone of voice in the thing. And the tone of voice was, you say God's all nice, but okay? So, but I want to be fair and look at it, okay? Couple of thoughts on this. One, the statement that Jesus did not come to abolish the law but to fulfill it was in the context of him telling ordinary people that they could be salt and light, okay? So in other words, they were making a point that Jesus would have been for stoning kids, okay? So, and they said, and the scripture they quoted was, he said he came to fulfill the law, you know? And, of course, the context of him saying, I didn't come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it, was him saying that ordinary, non-elite people could be used by God. And he was saying, I know you think that's abolishing it, but no, that's how it actually was all along. The Pharisees are the ones telling you that ordinary people can't be used by God, all right? That's one. 2, any interpretation of Torah outside of how Jesus lived it misses the point. Okay? 3, the Mishnah, which once again, here's our historical arc, the Mishnah, which is the Jewish compilation of civil and religious law, said that this command was never, ever, 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 ever carried out, and it was never meant to be carried out. It was meant to be a deterrent to keep people behaving. So it wasn't meant to be enforced, it was meant to be deterred, and in the history of all of Israel, it was never carried out. Okay? That's the Mishnah. 3, if you love God and love each other, you've kept this command. Because everything hinges on that, all right? All right, now let's get to some of the basics. First, we confuse the word son with the word child. It's not a child. This is an adult, okay? Light, life, and increase, and death, darkness, decrease are metaphors about anything that leads you to wholeness or disrepair. So it says to stone him to death. Now, there's 2 ways to take this. I've actually stood at the place that they talk about this. It's right outside the Lion Gate in the city of Jerusalem. If you're standing right outside, go to the gate of the town. It's right outside the Lion Gate where they would take children when they were little kids, and they would stand them there, and there was men, and the wall is as high as that, and there would be men up there, and they would say, if you cause a breakdown of the kingdom of God, it is best for us to take you here and have you stoned. Then for that to happen, the kid's going, and then they used it as a deterrent, okay? So there's 2 ways to read the word stoning. The word stoning used here can have 2 meanings. I just forgot the word. Hang on. Ragam, R-A-G-A-M. It can have 2 meanings. First meaning is to pick up a rock and hurl it at you. Second meaning of the same word is to cast out. So you can see what hurl at, cast out. So one way you could take it is to take him to the edge of the city and stone him until he actually dies. The other way is to purge the darkness from your community by casting him out of the community until he's willing to behave a lot better, which is how it was enforced. In Leviticus, it says that if someone is amongst your community and refuses to listen to all discipline, so it's after a big effort was made. Whatever, I could tell you what the big effort was, but it's not for that. So it's after a very big effort was made that included the involvement of a minion. A minion was 10 men okay? So after a gigantic effort was made to get you to see how the way you're behaving is negatively affecting the whole community, after a big effort was made, you could take them to the edge of the community and you could cast them out until which time they were willing to repent, and then you must welcome them back with a meal. So you see how very quickly the stoning of children, no. And all you have to do is read Jewish historical documents to see that no one ever took it with option A interpretation. It never, ever, not one time was enforced.
Which is exactly what Paul taught the Corinthian church.
Yes.
Right? If they're turn them over to Satan.
Exactly. Cast them into the
dark.
dark.
He has to write them back and say, hey, listen, he's repented. Let
Yeah,
him back in.
with a meal. Exactly. Exactly right. It's always reconciliation at a table, shulchan. And so that seems to be the case at the end of Revelation when the kingdom of heaven's established, is you're welcome in here, but you can't do that. And so you have to sit out there, and you can sit out there as long as you'd like. I'm going to keep inviting you, but you can't do that. And so it seems to be the truth in Genesis, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, Corinthians, and Revelation. This seems to be a pattern.
And it's interesting he calls that turn them over to Satan.
Yeah, turn them over to the accuser, to the person perpetuating the darkness. It's interesting. So all of a sudden, if you've ever had an atheist say, how could you serve a God that told people to stone kids? See, one of my favorite atheists in the world is Penn Jillette. I think he's awesome. I think Penn Jillette is amazing. And one of the big reasons I think it's amazing is Penn Jillette, although an atheist, constantly responds to an unknown God. And the reason he left Christianity was because his pastor wouldn't let him ask questions. So and he talks about that in his book, God No. He wrote a book he rewrote the Ten Commandments, is the Atheist Ten Commandments. And he called the book God No. And I know a lot of Christians would be scared to pick up the book, but I don't mind hearing his perspective. And in that book, he told a story about why he left Christianity. And it was because he was devouring the Bible. And he found scary things like God stoning children, and his pastor said, you're not allowed to ask questions about it. And that's why he left Christianity. And he said any system that won't let you ask questions is a dangerous. Amen. And can we get, yeah. Is he right? Yeah, of course he's right. And so he, so like thou shalt not commit adultery, he rewrote it to, if you choose to get married, be faithful to one, and if you can't make that deal, just don't do it. and so Penn Jillette is known worldwide for his philanthropy and his kindness to people and that kind of thing. And he talks about in the book, he said, there's this one time a Christian, and he'll actually have kind, genuine discussions with Christians. There was a show, you can YouTube this, he was on with Rabbi Daniel Lapin and Glenn Beck and him. And he goes, this sounds like a joke. There was a Mormon and a rabbi and an atheist. And you ought to hear him talk about God. I think I don't think he's as atheist as he thinks. And so, but I just really, I really love him. But one of the, he said this Christian came up to him once and said, well, if you're an atheist, what keeps you from raping and killing everybody you want? And he said, I can say that I have raped and killed every person I ever wanted. Nothing stops me from doing it. I've raped and killed every person I've ever wanted, which is zero. If it takes the power of Jesus to keep you from wanting to rape or kill people, you're a psychopath. So right. So I just like it. But this was one of the passages he quotes in his book about if God wrote that, how can you ever? And it's because of our avoidance. And all you have to understand is the historical arc to understand what was going on there. Okay, so the stoning of children, an eye for an eye. There's another good one. An eye for an eye. People quote that. Well, eye for an eye was kind because before that was written, judgments and consequences were arbitrary based on judges. And so all it took was one corrupt judge. And so in Deuteronomy, he says, we're not living like we did in Egypt, and the punishment must fit the crime, which no one would have went, what? That's the law. No, they'd been like, this is the nicest thing I have ever heard. I've ever heard. Let me give you a few more because I'm going to run out of time if I spend too much time on one thing. Okay, Psalm 23, right? Okay. So Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd. I shall not be in want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the quiet waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Have you ever seen the paths of righteousness? I have. So we interpret that in 2013 in Detroit, and what we think is God is leading me not to smoke, drink, or go to bad movies, and that makes his name great. No. This is written in the context of an ancient Middle Eastern shepherd. Now, if you've ever been to Israel, I just went, and what I could not believe is how hilly it was. That's the one I could not believe. Do you guys remember my horse or donkey message? Remember that we talked about that? Remember I talked about the Mount of Olives Cemetery?
Right.
Where there are stones, and the stones cry. Because I'd read about the Mount of Olives Cemetery. Well, I pictured, the cemetery next door, that's cemetery. Mount of Olives Cemetery is the whole Mount of Olives. It's the biggest thing I've ever seen other than Arlington National. That thing is enormous. So it helps you to see. I couldn't believe how hilly it was. So here's what would happen. So you're a shepherd. Are you the only shepherd in the country? No. So there's you got your next door neighbor shepherd, and then you got your next door neighbor shepherd. So what they did is they had their hills. So you got this hill, and then a little valley, and then this hill, and this little valley, right? And so this hill is the Willard. This is the Willard Shepherd Farm, right? And this hill is the Crisco Shepherd Farm, right? And so can you see where there would be tension if my sheep started eating his grass? Or you think there was ever arguments between the Willards and the Criscos about, I think I'm one short here, right? And so what they had to do is they had to come up with a way to feed their sheep without impeding upon their neighbor's boundary. And so what they would do, and if you go to Israel, you can see this. I saw it, but I didn't know what it was till the history guy pointed it out. That you see these lines, and that you can see them. It's clearly, like, it's not like, what are you talking about? No, it's right there where they do this, right? And then you're looking at the hill this way, and then it disappears, and then it comes out the other end here. And then it disappears, and it comes out the other end here, and so forth and so on. And then you could tell that the shepherd is walking his sheep in straight, he will make your paths straight, in straight circular paths like this in order to ascend the hill. Who can ascend the hill, right? So this is what would happen. This system was called the paths of righteousness because it enabled me to feed my sheep all the way up without ever worrying about them eating his. So the paths of righteousness was God leading you to your peak without impeding upon your neighbor's path. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. If you ascend your own hill, stepping on everybody on the way up, it's for your name's sake. But he leads you on paths of righteousness for his name's sake. When God takes you to the peak, it's not hurting anybody else. It's you being faithful to your path as you ascend the hill of the Lord. Now, when I looked at this, I was looking at Jerusalem and I said, well, if the goal is to get, why not go straight up? Why not go straight up? And the history guy said, when you're journeying with God, you don't even know you're ascending. You're just one day different. It's not hard work. It's just slowly but surely you're one click different. And it's not till you get here and look where you used to be that you go, wow, I've come a long way. that your journey with God in passive righteousness is never hard. It's a gradual circular path where you just keep coming around to the same spot, but you're one step better than you used to be. Passive righteousness. Passive righteousness. So do you see how understanding topography, geography, historical arc helps you understand Psalm 23? He leads me in passive righteousness for his name's sake. For his name's sake. Okay. Here's one. What city was Jesus from? Nazareth. Is that a big town or a small town? Small community of about 40 people in his day. Not very big at all. What was Jesus' occupation outside of rabbi school? His family shop was a woodworking carpentry shop. Now, how much work is there for a carpenter in a community of 40 people? Not much. So where would you have to go? You'd have to go to the bigger city centers, right? And so what would have happened in those days all the time is the tradesmen from small towns would go on journeys with their father to make enough money to come back to take care, and then they would do this. Now, the closest city center to Jesus was in a great situation. The closest city center to Jesus was actually only 1.5 Ks away in a place called Sepphoris. Sepphoris was the capital of the entire region. It was the city center. And so Jesus and his father would have went to Sepphoris all the time doing carpentry work. Okay. Now, if you know that and you start reading the history of Sepphoris, you find something very dire. In 14 AD, there was a Roman general named Varus who came into the town of Sepphoris. And what had happened was there was a small group of people who were choosing to stand up against the Roman regime. And he decided, I'm going to make them pay for this. And so he came into Sepphoris, and he decided to crucify every person in Sepphoris. Roughly 2,850 people is the best guess. So Varus came in with his platoon of soldiers, and he crucified every person in Sepphoris. Well, if you crucify every person in Sepphoris, what do you need? You need 2,800 crosses. Who do you contact to make 2,800 crosses? The local carpenter. So is it possible that Jesus and his father were the cross makers for the Roman government? That was part of their job. That was part of the job they were forced to do, was to make crosses for their own people. See, sometimes God forces you into situations where you're forced to do something you don't want to do, only to prepare you for something that's coming later. See, sometimes you're in a situation, you're going, I can't believe I'm here. But it's only preparing you for what God has for you. It's only Jesus, as the town carpenter, would have been forced to make any cross the Roman general told him to make. He was the town carpenter. So was his father. And so sometimes you're forced to do things. Have you ever been in a situation you couldn't believe you were there, and you're like, I can't believe God has me here? And then you start to wonder if it's God at all. And actually, sometimes you're forced to do things that you never would do to prepare you for something that's an even bigger mission than you ever thought possible. Maybe what gave Jesus just the strength to stand up against Rome was the fact that he was tired of helping them. Maybe that was part of the reason that he was willing to go all the way. Maybe a lot of this, we think about Jesus as fully God, and amen. But he was also fully human. And it takes some guts and some willpower to take on horrific regimes of corrupt power. And maybe part of God's prepping Jesus for what he had to go through was making him so sick of the Roman army and their corruption he was the cross maker. He was the town carpenter. And once again, I didn't just tell you anything you didn't know. You knew Jesus was a carpenter, right? You knew he lived in Israel. during Roman oppression, and you knew that a part of Roman oppression was crucifying anybody that crossed them, right? You just didn't connect the dots that where did they get their crosses from? They didn't ride around with them. They got them from the local carpenter. And so, once again, historical arc. Okay. One of the stories in the Bible that really bothered me my whole life, because it just makes God seem like a jerk, is there's a story in the Gospels about a pool called the Pool of Bethesda. And essentially, the story goes that there is a guy that's been sitting there for 38 years. And the reason he's not healed is because the angel stirs the water and only the first person in gets healed. Anybody besides me ever have well, not just that. What kind of God heals one? All these people sitting there, angel stirs. Guy jumps in. Oh, well, for all of you. I never was comfortable with it. I never thought, yeah, I'm okay with that kind of God, But I didn't know the answer, so I avoided it. And if anybody ever asked me about it, I would give one of those pat Christian answers like, well, God's God, I don't know. But I never was comfortable in myself. And to be fair, God is God. And he can do what he likes. I just was never comfortable with that story. Until I saw it. I went and saw the Pool of Bethesda. And I can show you pictures of it. I can show you pictures of it. The thing, because you guys were in Israel when I was there, hey? Have you seen the Pool of Bethesda? Were you flabbergasted by how deep it was? Tell me if I'm exaggerating. It's 40 foot deep, at least. I mean, you go to the Pool of Bethesda, and it's straight down. It's at least as high as this, at least. I could not believe how deep the Pool of Bethesda was. And so the tour guide, I went on an academic tour, not a tourist tour. So I actually went for 4 private days with Joseph Prince's history teacher, okay? So he's trying to teach history, right? He's trying to teach me historical arc. So we're literally just walking by the Pool of Bethesda, and he goes, "Oh, that's the Pool of Bethesda." And I went, I said, "Oh, no, look here now. That's the Pool of Bethesda, yeah." Because see, what I had in my mind was that, sort of, where, lame people could kind of go, right? But you saw the Pool of Bethesda. I've seen the Pool of Bethesda. If a lame cat jumps in the Pool of Bethesda, he's gone. No, gone. Like 40 feet down, gone. I said, this is... And then I thought I was confused. You know those moments where you thought you knew something, and then you go, no, I'm like confused. I said, oh, I must be confused. I thought the Pool of Bethesda was where like the angel stirred the waters and the lame people would try to get in. And he goes, oh, yeah, it's the Pool of Bethesda. That's right. And I went, well, Bo, whoever was number 2... No, there's no words for how deep this is. No words. And I said, man, oh, there you go. That's one picture of it. And so, and picture that, and it's all of 100 yards long. Okay, so a football field of that deep. And I went, good job up there, whatever you're doing. If it's not the Pool of Bethesda, good illusion. He probably just Googled deep pit, right? They won't know. It's full of them. Preachers do that all the time. It's called misdirection. All right. So anyway, I said, man, and the history expert looked at me like, you don't know? And I said, man, I'm missing part of the story. I'm definitely missing part of the story. He goes, God didn't do that. That was Roman corruption. And his tone of voice was, everybody knows that. And I went, really? And then he showed me this gigantic plaque that's in the public tourist place that all you have to do is read it and it tells the whole story. He goes, everybody knows it's not God. That was Roman. He goes, you didn't think Jerusalem was ruled by Jehovah in the first century, did you? And I went, no, man. No, man. Absolutely didn't. He said the pool of Bethesda was the aesthetic pool of the Greek god Serapis. He said just like Serapis. He said just like today, Jerusalem is broken into 4 quarters. There's a Christian quarter, a Jewish quarter. There's a Muslim quarter and a Armenian quarter. He said Jerusalem's been ruled by, so many different people that they left their marks on. He said that's why you see all these Christian churches. All the Christian churches you see in Jerusalem were built by Helena, who was the wife of Constantine. When he made Christianity the only official religion, she came into Jerusalem, and every major landmark, Gethsemane, the Golgotha, all of that, she built a Christian church there. And he said these Christian churches weren't here when Jesus was here. They were there after Helena built them. And so you got to consider where we were in the timeline. And so then he stops. He goes, I thought, like, seriously, his tone of voice was like, duh. Like, I mean, he wasn't cruel or not humble. He was just like, oh, sorry, if I'd have known you didn't know this, I'd have stopped. I'm sorry. I thought everybody knew this. And I'm going, I didn't know it. And I'm assuming we didn't learn it in Bible college, I can tell you that. And so we were taught in Bible college, God stirred the waters. He said, no, what would happen is, he said, this is the pool of Bethesda, the deep part. He said, right here is the ruins of the temple to Serapis. He said, so you got the deep pool of Bethesda here. And he said, you got to do some imagination work because this is ruins. There was a gigantic temple here to honor Serapis. He said, now the problem is when the pool of Bethesda overflowed, they had to have a collection pool so that it didn't, right? So they had sort of a collection area, so when it overflowed, it would flow into this. He said, so then he shows me the pool next to it, which was, that deep. And in that pool, there was these little pedestals all over the place. These little pedestals all over the place, and you could still see it from the ruins. He said, so picture this. If you're standing here and there's a gigantic building there, can you see on the other side? I said, no. So the giant pool of Bethesda is there, all right? He said, when it would overflow, it would trickle into this pool. He said, now, the Greek god Serapis, the Greek goddess Serapis was the god of healing. So the Romans saw this happening a few times. They could see, because they could be everywhere, they could see that it was fixing to come over, and then when it flowed in, the water would go like this. And he said, so the Romans figured out a way to take advantage of the poor. And they said, hey, that is the angel of Serapis stirring the waters, and whoever's the first one in gets healed. And so they set up these pedestals to where people had to pay the Romans a monthly fee to sit there. And so that these lame people would pay a monthly fee to sit there and wait on the waters to stir. But the Romans could see when it was fixing to happen, they'd put their own person there. And because he wasn't nothing wrong with him, he would just jump in, get out and proclaim he was healed. And they kept the lie going to keep people hope. Oh, he got healed. I told you, you just got to be the first one in. And so Jesus shows up. This guy's been there 38 years. So for 38 years, he's been paying the monthly fee to sit there. And obviously nothing's happening, but they're seeing, these healings that were contrived by Rome. And Jesus says, this isn't right. And he takes care of the situation. And so all it was historical art. And I'm telling you, there's a big sign right by there telling the whole story. Now, how many pastors have been to Jerusalem in the last 50 years? And no one read the sign. They come back and keep preaching that nonsense. And they're not bad. They just didn't read the sign. So it wasn't God stirring the water and only healing one. it was Roman corruption telling people that the angel of Serapis was, when they saw it was fixing to overflow, they said, oh, here it comes. First one in. And they had their own guy there. And they used that as a way to charge people for their seats on the pedestal so that they could get in. See? So it's, once again, history.
Which, Shane, is a great example that everything in the Bible is historically accurate, but it's not necessarily God speaking.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, great. Yeah, exactly. Richard Rohr says it this way. The only way to read Middle Eastern spiritual literature is to realize it's all true and some of it happened. Because some of it is metaphors, but some of it is historically accurate, and it's all true.
It's true.
It's all truth. Some of it is metaphors. Some of it is made-up stories. Like there wasn't actually a prodigal son. I mean, this guy, he's telling an allegory, right? But the Pool of Bethesda is a historically accurate story where the interpretation through the years has just gotten jaded, you know?
Because we've moved on from that historical point.
Yeah.
It's like people say to me things from about England, and it's a lot of rubbish.
Right, exactly.
Taking out absolute context.
Exactly. So history is like that. So as stories get told through generations, stuff changes a little bit. And the Bible recorded something 2,000, and it was written down. And so, okay, so this is what happened. And then there's been all these things. And so you go to another great example of historical arc in this is the gates of hell. And the gates of hell will not prevail. Well, how many of you have heard my message, The Authority of the Rabbi? Right? So I did this years ago here. If you haven't heard it, I can't do it again because they would all know what I'm saying. So it's on YouTube. It's out there. Well, in that message, The Authority of the Rabbi, I talk about Jesus going to Caesarea Philippi and the temple to the goat god Pan, and they were having sexual relations with goats because Pan was the goat god. And then the fear was that if you didn't worship Pan properly, the gates of hell will swallow you. And so when I went to Jerusalem, the part of our tour was going to Caesarea Philippi. So we show up in Caesarea Philippi, and you know what Caesarea Philippi is called today? It's not called Caesarea Philippi. It's called Panaia. Panaia, P-A-N, the city of Pan. Yeah, Panaia, the city of Pan. And so you go in there, and they had 5 temples to different gods. The biggest one was the goat god Pan, and right there on a sign says, "You're standing in the court of Pan and the nymphs." Well, what was a nymph? A nymphomania? So you're standing in the court of Pan and the nymphs where they would worship Pan, and then they had some sort of like sculptural rendition of what was going on, and behind it is the gates of hell. And so it's on a sign that anybody could read. And so I went and stood in the gates of hell. And so any message that talks about Jesus saying the gates of hell will not prevail, and frames it as there's this place after you die, and there's the gates, and Jesus, that might be true, but it's not the point of that. Jesus was standing in Caesarea Philippi, looking at the gates of hell, going, yeah, we're going to build, and by the way, the gates of hell is at the bottom of a gigantic mountain. Did you guys see it? Okay. It's at the bottom of a mountain that would be, I don't know, 250 feet high, straight up a rock. I mean, I'm talking straight up a rock, and right at the bottom is the gates of hell. So Jesus is standing at the base of this mountain going, upon this rock we can build a church, and not even the gates of hell will prevail against it. Essentially, where Jesus was standing, what would have been going on? Worship of Pan. And so Jesus doesn't go there and go, stop it, you immoral people, you know, and he definitely doesn't tell them, if you don't stop, you're going to burn in hell. Well, that's why they were doing it. They were scared of Hades. So he doesn't do that. He goes in the middle of them and goes, this thing has no power. You're scared of this? No. He stands there and goes, bring it on, man. You're being held in captivity to fear of something that does not exist. This behavior is being driven by that. I'm taking that on. See, it doesn't, and in my experience with people, it never is effective to be the moral police. Never. It's never effective to be the moral police. It's always good to sort of find out what's driving the behavior and then go after that. Than it is, I mean, having sex with goats, pretty extreme. I mean, if there was anything Jesus was going to go, ooh, you stop that or you're going to burn. It would have been having sex with goats, right? For goodness sake. But he doesn't. He just goes, Peter, who do you say that I am? You're the Christ, the Son of the living God. Right. Upon this rock, we can build a church, and not even the gates of hell will prevail against it. I've stood there. And here's really what I couldn't believe, is literally thousands of pastors have went to Israel in the last 50 years. And everything I'm telling you right now is on signs for tourists to read.
But if you're really intelligent, you don't need to read because you already know everything.
Oh, you're talking about them, not me. Oh, right, okay. I was like, man, you're really taking me. Right. And to be fair, if I go to a museum, I don't read everything either. I go, oh, that's cool, that's cool, that's cool. But nobody? Like the Pool of Bethesda, the sign is bigger than that. Outlining the temple to Serapis, explaining who Serapis was. It's like, wow, man. Wow. So this is all, do you see how historical arc, and I mean, what time is it? Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay. All right. So two more points. One is Revelation was always progressive. So when you're interpreting any scripture, you have to ask yourself, where in the historical arc are we, and where in the progress of redemption are we? Those two questions are very important. You say, Shane, what do you mean by Revelation was progressive? Well, God's revelation to Abraham was you don't have to sacrifice children anymore. No one's getting that revelation anymore because it's been established. To Abraham, it took faith not to do that. Putting his faith and trust in God had everything to do with him choosing not to sacrifice his child and accept the sacrifice God provided. So is Abraham in heaven or hell? He didn't say the prayer or anything. That was his response to Christ. Okay? All right? So Abraham's revelation of redemption was you don't have to sacrifice children. Moses' revelation was you only have to have one sacrifice per year. That was a revolutionary thought. You didn't have to endlessly sacrifice, you just have to do one. Then Jesus brings this revelation of redemption that says, actually you don't need one, we'll just do one for the whole world for all time. It's not one sacrifice per family per year, it's one sacrifice for the whole world, for all time. And then Paul brings this revelation of redemption that says, actually the sacrifice for the whole world has been true since Genesis 1. So actually when Abraham thought he had to sacrifice, he never actually had to because God had already taken care of it. And so, but no way Abraham could know that. And so you just have, what you see is God's relentless pursuit of people through history. You see God's relentlessly pursuing to help them understand him one click better, one notch better, one more notch better. And the truth is we're still in that sort of progress of redemption. We know that Jesus is the only way. We do know that. But your journey towards Jesus and what that looks like is a progress. And 400 years from now, we will not be the generation who they look back on and go, well, thank God for them. They're the ones that figured it all out. No way. One last thought. As I saved this one for last and then I ran out of time. It also helps to, so always look at the progress of redemption. Always look at the historical arc. Let women shave their heads and clip their nails before you take them sexually. Where is that in the historical arc? And realize that women would have celebrated that scripture. There wouldn't have been a rally in D.C. against it, okay? All right? So, historical arc, progress of redemption, and it sometimes helps to look at geography. All right? I should have planned this better and had a map, but I'll show you. Sea of Galilee. Tiberias. Jesus spent a lot of his time. Caesarea Philippi is up there. That's where the gates of hell is, okay? Sea of Galilee, Tell me what that is. Jordan River. Just making sure you follow me. You're nasty. I'm just kidding. Dead Sea. Okay, all right. So, Sea of Galilee, Dead Sea, Jordan River. I don't know why I thought this, but I guess as a kid you just sort of have these pictures in your mind. When it says the children of Israel came from Egypt and through the wilderness, and then they crossed the Jordan River, where did you reckon they crossed? I just always had it in my mind they crossed up here. You know, like in the middle somewhere. Jerusalem, try to draw a straight line. Jerusalem's here. It says that Moses watched it from Mount Nebo, which is in the exact latitude line as Jerusalem. Which is to cross there, they would have crossed the Jordan River at the exact point that it met the Dead Sea, which is the lowest point in the world. Right here is Jericho. So how did they end up there? It's a straight line over. How'd they end up there? So we have to understand this. In Middle Eastern culture, they would pitch their tents north to south because the sun rises in the... They would pinch a part of the tent up on the east side so that when the sun rose, it would come underneath and it would wake them up. It was their alarm clock. It's where sun worship started. So in Middle Eastern culture, more east, more holy. Always. More east, more holy. In Egyptian culture, more south, more holy. Greek culture, more north, more holy. In Hebrew culture, more west, more holy. You think about this. This starts in the east, and they're going west into Jerusalem. You get into Jerusalem, and you hit the outer court first, the inner court second, the Holy of Holies. The more west you go, west of the Holy of Holies, and the exact latitude line is Golgotha, Calvary. West of that is the tomb. So the more west you go, the more holy you're getting. Right? Now here's the point I'm making. When the children of Israel crossed here, it was a later writer said it was a symbol of baptism, that the old them was being washed into the Dead Sea, the Dead Sea. Jericho is off the line. In Jewish teaching, Jericho is the place of temptation. It's the place of distraction. It's on your way to your destiny, you get distracted and go there. And when you do that, it never comes down as easy as you think. There's always some big fortified wall there. It's just never what you think. But when you come to Christ, this is a great symbol of redemption. When you come to Christ, everything you are is washed into the Dead Sea, where it cannot be remembered anymore. Does anything live in the Dead Sea? Actually, yes. There are small pockets of freshwater springs that comes from an underneath source. And so in the Dead Sea are little pockets, little bitty pockets. And inside that are fish swimming around. But if you watch them, you can see when they get to the edge of their pocket, it's like they're in an aquarium that doesn't exist. They get to, and they realize, I can't live in there. I have to turn around. So it's like they're in a walled aquarium, but they're not. The only way to fish the old you out of the Dead Sea is to physically go to the Dead Sea yourself and reach down over the top and pick it out. In other words, you have to work hard to drum up your old man. That thing's dead. And the best thing for you to do is to keep moving forward. Don't ever go into the Dead Sea. Don't ever be distracted by Jericho. Keep going west until you get to what God has for you, which is ultimately found at the cross. You keep moving that way. Don't be distracted by the old you. It's in the Dead Sea, and it's behind you. Don't be distracted by Jericho. It's off the path. Keep going west. Grab what God has for you. Do you see how historical arc, geography, progress of redemption, these are massive keys to hermeneutics. It's massive keys to interpreting Scripture.
Yes.
And you can apply it to any, I only picked 6 examples, but you can grab anything you want. And you can go, okay, paths of righteousness, let's see what that is. Where are you on this? Are you heading up? Yep. You should be able to attain everything God has for you without hurting another person. Because it's your path. You don't have to eat his. It's your path. It's your path. You should be able to ascend your peak without stepping in someone else's grass. Okay? All right? I hope you guys enjoyed this morning. I hope it was a real blessing to you. All right? I'll hand this back to Pastor Richard, and we'll...